The air in the boardroom of the Phoenix Tower was so thick with tension, it felt suffocating, smelling of stale coffee and the distinct metallic scent of a company about to die. Standing in the corner, clutching a heavy roll of trash bags, was 12-year-old Nia, a girl who had spent her entire life trying to be invisible. She watched as Sheikh Al-Fayed, a man whose suit cost more than her mother would earn in 10 years, leaned back in his leather chair and smiled at the desperate American CEO across the table. To the Americans, Al-Fayed was a savior, a billionaire investor here to rescue their failing housing development firm. But as he turned to his assistant, his smile twisted into a sneer of pure malice. He spoke in a rapid, guttural Gulf Arabic dialect, assuming the filthy little pest in the corner couldn't understand a syllable of his elite tongue. He laughed about the trap he had buried in the contract, about how he would bulldoze the low-income apartments Nia lived in, and how he would bankrupt this stupid American company. He kicked the wastebasket toward Nia, snapping his fingers at her like she was a dog, completely unaware that the girl picking up his trash wasn't just listening. She was memorizing every single word of his confession. Nia knew what it felt like to be a ghost. In the gleaming glass hallways of Harrison Global, she and her mother, Sarah, were nothing more than moving furniture to the executives. They arrived after the business deals were done, buffing the marble floors and emptying the shredders, their existence acknowledged only when they made a mistake. While other 12-year-olds were worrying about middle school dances or video games, Nia was worrying about eviction notices. She lived in the Riverview projects, the very buildings that Harrison Global managed. But Nia had a secret escape. Every afternoon, while her mother worked her first shift, Nia sat in the basement of the public library. She didn't just read books, she devoured entire languages using online apps and videos. It started with Spanish to help her neighbors, then Mandarin, and finally Arabic, taught to her by an old refugee professor who recognized a spark of genius in her quiet eyes. She realized early on that language was a code, and if you broke the code, you could unlock the world. But she kept this hidden, burying her brilliance under a hoodie and a mop, because in her world, drawing attention to yourself was dangerous. On this particular Tuesday, the stakes were life and death, though only a few people in the room understood why. David Harrison, the CEO, sat at the head of the mahogany table, looking like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His company was bleeding money, and the $500 million investment from the Al-Fayed Group was his last hope. If he didn't secure the deal by midnight, the banks would foreclose, and thousands of families, including Nia's, would be thrown onto the street. Harrison was a good man, but he was desperate, and desperation makes people blind. He had fired his expensive legal team to save money, relying on standard contracts and trust. He believed Al-Fayed's promises of community revitalization. He didn't see the wolf baring its teeth. He only saw the hand reaching out to save him. Nia, standing silently by the door with her cleaning cart, felt the fear radiating off him. Then, the atmosphere shifted. The double doors swung open, and Sheikh Al-Fayed entered with the energy of a predator entering a pen of sheep. He was flanked by two assistants who carried briefcases like weapons. Al-Fayed didn't even look at Harrison at first. His eyes swept the room and landed on Nia. He stopped, his lip curling in disgust. "Remove this black trash from my office," he muttered in Arabic to his assistant, his voice low and venomous. He walked past her, deliberately kicking the trash bin she had just straightened, sending papers flying across the pristine floor. When Nia scrambled to pick them up, trying to stay out of the way, Al-Fayed grabbed her wrist. His expensive rings dug into her skin, painful and sharp. "Filthy little pest," he hissed in Arabic, leaning down so only she could feel his breath. "You understand nothing. Do you, little animal? Nia flinched, pulling her arm back, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She understood everything. She understood the hate. She understood the cruelty, and most importantly, she understood the plan. He began to whisper to his partner the moment he sat down. The negotiation began, and it was a massacre disguised as a meeting. Al-Fayed switched effortlessly to English, his voice dripping with charm as he flattered Harrison. "We want to be partners, David," he lied smoothly. "We want to build a future together." But every time Harrison looked down at the paperwork, Al-Fayed turned to his assistant and spoke in Arabic, dropping the mask. "The American fool is swallowing the bait," he laughed softly. "He doesn't know that the text gives us full control in 30 days, not 6 months. Nia, pretending to wipe dust from the credenza behind them, felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. She knew the clause he was talking about. In English, it looked standard. But Al-Fayed was explaining the real interpretation, a legal loophole based on international jurisdiction that Harrison's local lawyers would never catch, one that involved a $200 million penalty if they tried to stop him. The abuse didn't stop at words. As the meeting dragged on, Al-Fayed became more brazen. He signaled for coffee, and when Nia's mother, Sarah, hurried to pour it, her hand trembling from exhaustion, she spilled a single drop on the coaster. Al-Fayed exploded. He slammed his hand on the table, shouting in English about incompetence, but in Arabic he muttered, "She is as stupid as her monkey daughter." Sarah shrank back, apologizing profusely, terrified of losing the job that fed her family. Harrison tried to intervene, saying, "It's fine, let's focus on the deal." But Al-Fayed waved him off. "These people," Al-Fayed said in English, gesturing vaguely at Sarah and Nia, "they are clutter. Get them out." He was treating them like dirt to assert dominance, to throw Harrison off balance. Nia watched her mother's humiliation, a fire igniting in her belly that was hotter than fear. The clock ticked toward the deadline. Harrison picked up his fountain pen. "All right," he sighed, defeated but hopeful. "Let's sign. The sooner we get the funds, the sooner we can renovate the Riverview projects." Al-Fayed smirked, leaning forward. "Yes," he said in English, "renovate." Then he turned his head slightly and whispered to his assistant in Arabic, "We will bulldoze those slums on Monday. The land is worth more as a luxury resort." That was it. The line was crossed. Nia saw the destruction of her home, her neighbors thrown onto the street, her mother crying over a lost apartment. The fear that had paralyzed her for 12 years suddenly evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She wasn't just a cleaner anymore. She dropped the heavy roll of trash bags. The thud echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. Harrison froze, pen hovering over the paper. Al-Fayed turned, his eyes narrowing in irritation. Nia stepped away from the wall, walking straight toward the billion-dollar table. "Don't sign it," Nia said. Her voice was small, shaking slightly, but clear enough to cut through the hum of the air conditioner. The room went deadly silent. Harrison blinked, confused. "Nia? What are you doing?" Al-Fayed let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Get this child out of here," he barked at Harrison. "She is interrupting a $500 million transaction." Sarah rushed forward, grabbing Nia's shoulder. "Baby, stop, we have to go," she whispered, terrified. But Nia shrugged her mother off gently. She didn't look at Harrison. She looked directly at the billionaire. "He's lying to you, Mr. Harrison," Nia said, pointing a finger at the sheikh. "He just told his assistant that he's going to demolish the Riverview projects on Monday. He called it a luxury resort." Al-Fayed slammed his fist on the table, standing up to his full height. He towered over the girl, his face twisting into a mask of rage. "You little liar!" he shouted in English, trying to use his size to intimidate her. "You are making up fantasies. I never said that. How dare you accuse me?" He turned to Harrison, feigning outrage. "Is this how you run your company? Letting the help fabricate stories to sabotage deals? She is obviously crazy. She wants attention." He moved toward Nia as if to physically shove her out of the room. "I will have you arrested for slander," he roared. "You are worthless. You know nothing." He was betting on his power, betting that Harrison would trust a billionaire over a child. Nia didn't back down. She didn't flinch. She waited for him to take a breath, and then she pulled the trigger. She looked him dead in the eye and switched languages. "You called me a filthy pest," she spoke in flawless high court Arabic, her accent perfect. "You said Americans are stupid and easy to trick." Al-Fayed froze mid-step, his mouth hanging open. Nia didn't stop. "You cited the penalty structure. You said the Arabic text demands $200 million in damages if the contract is broken, not the standard fee." She turned to Harrison, switching back to English, but keeping her eyes on the terrified sheikh. "Mr. Harrison, check the subsidiary management section. He hid the penalty clause in the Arabic translation because he assumed you wouldn't hire a translator in time. He plans to steal the company in 30 days. The color drained from Al-Fayed's face completely. He wasn't looking at a cleaner anymore. He was looking at his executioner. Harrison's hands were shaking, but not from fear. From rage. He flipped the contract to the section Nia pointed out. He didn't read Arabic, but he saw the density of the text, the numbers Nia had quoted. He looked up at Al-Fayed, who was now stammering, trying to backpedal. "David, please. She is misinterpreting." "Get out," Harrison said, his voice quiet and deadly. "Get out of my office before I call the SEC and the FBI." Al-Fayed looked around the room, realizing he had no allies left. His assistant had already started packing his bag, terrified. The billionaire looked at Nia one last time, his arrogance shattered. He muttered a curse and fled the room, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. In the silence that followed, Harrison collapsed into his chair, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked at Nia, really seeing her for the first time. "You," he whispered. "You saved us. You saved the whole company." Sarah was sobbing in the corner, overwhelmed, but Nia walked over and hugged her. "It's okay, Mama," she said. "He can't hurt us." Harrison stood up and walked over to them. "Mrs. Williams," he said to Sarah, "you are not cleaning floors anymore. And Nia," he knelt down, putting a hand on her shoulder. "You just did the work of a senior partner. We are going to pay for your education. Whatever school you want, Harvard, Yale, MIT, it's yours." 5 years later, the boardroom of Harrison Global looked different. The low-income housing projects outside the window had been renovated, not bulldozed, shining with new paint and safe playgrounds. At the head of the table sat Nia, now 17, leading a meeting with international investors. She wasn't holding a mop. She was holding a tablet, reviewing contracts in 5 different languages. A new intern brought her a coffee, looking nervous. Nia smiled warmly, remembering the girl she used to be. "Thank you," she said. "And remember, never assume you're invisible. In this room, everyone is heard." She looked at the empty corner where she used to stand, knowing that the worthless trash Al-Fayed had tried to discard had become the foundation of the entire empire.